So to begin, those of you who have vision, who can see the screen, I do have some slides and I'll kind of follow the slide deck through, but I will try and describe each thing that I'm speaking about for those of you who are not seeing. I'm Eric Damery. I'm the Vice President of Software Product Management. I've been involved in the industry since about 1994, when I met the people that ran the company called Henter Joyce. Henter Joyce was the company that created the DOS screen reader JAWS, and in 1995 we released a Windows version. And I have stayed with this company, following it along. We became Freedom Scientific in the year 2000, and Vispero, Freedom Scientific, around 2016. And today I am responsible really for not only JAWS, but also for ZoomText, Fusion, and other software products within the organization. So what I think I say to people in many of these presentations, the best part of my job is that I get to experiment with this software most of the day. That isn't necessarily true every day, but there are many days where I get to do quite a few things with the software, and it's enjoyable. So I know many facets of the program. I know a lot of different areas. While I'm not an expert at any one, I know many. I wanted to talk a little bit about our versioning. We started using years like 2018, 2019, and so forth. We made this modification about 5 years ago, and the idea was we wanted to, if we were using version numbers, it didn't stay in sync. So this is much easier. And when someone says I'm using version 2022, you know they're on the updated software. Each year in October, we'll release a new version. And this year will be no exception. It'll be version 2023. And then that will continue to get updated throughout the year next year. We do go back and do some updates with earlier versions, but generally it's if something really goes wrong. Like if they changed Windows 11 and 2021 couldn't install in Windows 11 anymore, we would certainly go back and make modifications to it. But if they change something and one thing breaks in 2021 version, we may fix it in the later versions, but may not go back and respin that one. There are links on this slide, and I will make sure that this slide deck is made available to everybody at Site Village. If there's a way to pass these out, I'll get this deck to everybody. There are links on this particular slide that take you to our US webpage, where there is detail, in great detail, about each version that we've released and the enhancements that we did in each version along the way. So these are very useful. You can always get to these by going to freedomscientific.com, and under the software updates heading, you'll find links to JAWS, Fusion, and ZoomText, and it is on those pages where you can find everything about the products. Most recently in 2022, key new features included new voices for Vocalizer Expressive, including 6 new languages, automatic settings, import, and I'm going to talk about each of these in some detail. Simple user control over speech output, improved voice assistant, faster Braille language switching, in particular for multilingual users, of which I'm sure we have some. So to start with Serance, which is the new company formed by Nuance that controls Eloquence and Vocalizer Expressive for the automotive division, which is also where we take our voices from. So Serance is the company that controls that now. They released a new version. We're up to the latest version now in our 2022 release. It added 27 new voices, but in particular, 6 new languages that weren't represented before. So 20, I think about 20 of the voices come in languages that already had some voices, and they've added some new ones. But you will find Belgian French, Farsi, Malay, Slovenian, Ukrainian, and Vietnamese voices now included for 2021. To get to these voices, if you've got JAWS, ZoomText, or Fusion, and you go under the voices options in those UIs, you will find something called Add Voices, and that's where you can locate each and every one of the voices from Serance that are available to you, and you can sample many of them, and then you can have them downloaded and installed. Once you've put one of these voices on your computer, it will work for JAWS, ZoomText, and Fusion. You don't have to install it for each. You install it once and it's exposed for each product, and it will work for subsequent releases that we do. Automatic settings migration. This was a big move, something we did for ZoomText first the year before that we've now added in for JAWS and for Fusion. So when we come out with, if you have, say, 2021 or 2022 installed on your computer today, when the 2023 releases come out in October this year, when you install them, they automatically adopt whatever settings you previously set up in the earlier version. For years, we didn't do that. And we had a migration tool that you could use to bring them in. But the idea was we always wanted you to start with a clean new version. Well, we've changed that philosophy because many users spend a lot of time setting it up just the way they want it. And we wanted to make it very easy for them to transition to the new version. We also added a new option for JAWS users. You'll find under the options menu referred to as restore to factory settings in English. That will be whatever is your localization for your version. You'll find a similar meaning name in that menu. And when you choose that, you're basically clearing your user settings folder out for the current version, not for the previous versions. And it will put you back and let you start with a whole fresh install with no settings. There is a warning if you choose that. It says, are you sure you want to do this? And if you proceed, you'll be starting over setting up your user settings. Improved responsiveness in Office 365. So Microsoft released Office 365 a number of years ago, and this is the area where they're putting new development in. And part of that new development includes improvements to their accessibility APIs, the information that is communicated or exposed to screen readers such as JAWS and magnification software such as ZoomText. So we interact with those APIs that they have been improving to improve our access to various features in the software. So if improvements are going to come in the area of track changes, for instance, it's going to be the newer versions of Office with Office 365 development that are going to benefit from it. So Office 365 can also be referred to as 2019. You can look at your about box and you can find out what version you're at. If you're not sure, you can reach out and check with our support department to see if that version of Word that you're running is the latest and greatest in Office 365. We do encourage all of our users to stay up to date. Things are changing and changing rapidly, so try not to get locked into one older version of Office and keep using it and expect to see the improvements that we come out with work there. I think that's all I'll say about Office. If you've got some specific questions about it, we'll come back and take those during that session. We introduced an improvement back in the 2021, I guess this came in the 2022 release. And that was a way of moving through Outlook messages. And if you haven't tried this yet, I would encourage you to do so. When you have a message in Outlook that contains a lot of replies and forwards with many other people, and then all of a sudden you want to forward that message, or someone forwards a message like that and includes you in the thread now, oftentimes you have to dig deep into that message past all of those individuals who have replied and forwarded it to get to what the main content of the email thread was. And this can be difficult, to say the least, because you have to navigate down through all of the froms and tos and date sents and subjects to get to the new message. So in the 2022 release, if you open up a mail like that and you press the navigational quick key N in the US, it may be different in some of your languages, you'll have to check. But if you press the letter N, it moves you past the next heading, past the current email in the thread, past the next heading, and puts your cursor on the first line of the next message in the thread. And it communicates to you who sent it and the date they sent it. And then it reads the first line, and you can continue to read within that message, or you can just press the letter N and jump past the next heading and go to that next message. So if you haven't tried this yet, please do. I think you'll find it to be very beneficial. If you're on things like listservs, where there's a lot of responses back and forth between mails, this can be a very powerful feature in those places. You can also, we added a couple of keystrokes while you're moving. If you use Alt plus the letter, the number 1, or Alt plus the number 2, it will repeat who sent the current section that you're reading and the date that that section was written. So instead of having to move back up through your message to get back up and find out and remind yourself who did it, you can get it right there. More control over speech output. We gave consumers the ability now to control their volume, and specifically the volume of the synthesizer versus the volume of other applications. When COVID hit and people started having to work at home, and there was much more use of Zoom and Teams and things like that, people needed to have better control so that they could pay attention to a meeting and still navigate with a screen reader if they wanted to have their speech on. And this is where I thought this was pretty helpful. To do it while you're using JAWS or Fusion, you can use the JAWS key plus the space bar, which puts you into layered mode. Then you can hit V for the volume layer and press J for JAWS if you want to adjust just the JAWS volume, or S for system volume if you want to adjust the volume for all applications. And then you can adjust those with the arrow keys, or page up and page down to change them in greater numbers. And when you're done adjusting, you hit escape, you leave the layer, and now those will be retained until you adjust them back. Oftentimes I adjust the volume first, and then I adjust the JAWS volume secondly. Actually, I had a note here that was in the 2021 release, and that carried forward to 2022. Now, in 2022, we introduced something even better, a balance control. So for those of you who use headsets, and I have a headset, and I generally wear my headset in meetings and so forth, and it's a USB headset, and when I'm in a Zoom call, or when I'm listening to some other audio, but I still want to have JAWS, and I want to listen to JAWS on one channel and the other audio from any other app in the other channel, you can use this feature. And to get to it, insert space bar, JAWS key plus space, V for volume layer, and the letter B for balance. And then you press left or right arrow and it will send the JAWS or Fusion output to one channel and leave everything else in the other channel. So now it'll be perfectly, it makes it much easier to listen. And that combined with the volume adjustments can be very helpful. So I lower JAWS down, put JAWS on one channel, everything else on the other channel, and it makes it much easier to participate in these meetings. When you're done and you want to recenter your speech to put it all back in stereo, you can either restart JAWS, reboot your computer, or you can simply do JAWS key plus space, the letter V for volume layer, and then up arrow to center. And finally, in this area, we made an improvement to change the sound card on the fly because of these much more prevalent use of these applications like Teams and Zoom. Oftentimes they will change the sound card, maybe your default sound card, and oftentimes you may find that you've lost your JAWS speech because the application that just started, or if you plug something in, it's taken the sound, the default sound card away from JAWS, and JAWS didn't know it, so JAWS didn't follow it. So JAWS is still running, but you no longer have speech. To resolve this, we've had a option in the menu system that you could go to change it. However, because you didn't have speech, if you weren't using Braille, this could be very difficult. So we added in a way to do this by memory. Insert space, the JAWS key plus spacebar, V for volume layer, and the letter C for card. And then you can just start pressing either the down arrow or the up arrow. And I say either because they loop around. And oftentimes you've got 3, maybe 4 sound devices on your computer. And as you arrow, it moves to the next sound device and it tries to say something. And if it doesn't, if you don't hear it, you press down arrow again, eventually it'll get back to the default sound card and you'll hear it. You can experiment with this at any time on your computer to see how it works. And I encourage you to do it before you need it so that you're familiar with it. So JAWS key plus space, V for volume, C for card. And if you've got speech already, when you press the down arrow, you should notice that you lose your speech. JAWS will move to some other sound card. Keep pressing down arrow and it'll cycle back to the one that you were on. Show clock on the Braille display. This is something that got added after one of our, I think it was our FS open line, and someone had brought up the need to be able to maintain control over what the exact time is while they were doing a presentation. So let's say I had to make sure I was going to stop talking at a particular time, right at a particular time because a recording was going on or something else was going to start. While I'm talking, if I have my Braille display connected, it would be nice to have the clock that's provided on the PC sent straight to my Braille display and be able to view it, not only see the hours and minutes, but I could switch it to the minutes and seconds so I could keep track of the time. So that's the feature we put in. You can turn this on a couple of different ways if you just want to experiment with it. This is assuming you have a Braille display that has status cells, and those status cells are not controlled by the firmware, but controlled by JAWS. Focus displays are an example of this. I believe the HumanWare displays also work that way. And to toggle it on, JAWS key plus shift key at the same time and press F12. Normally you would hit JAWS key F12 to hear what time it is. So when you add the shift key to it, if you've got a Braille display like a Focus, it will send the clock output to your status cells on the left side of your display. You'll see those 4 cells will represent the hour and the minutes. If you want to change it to be seconds, in minutes instead of hours and minutes. If you go into the settings center, the JAWS settings center, and search for clock in there under the default file, or you can make it application specific. So you might want it to display in certain apps. Search for the word clock and you'll find a setting called display clock / time and status cells. And there's various settings in there that you can adjust. Braille language switching for multilingual users is a pretty significant change that we did in the 2022 cycle. A lot of work went into this to make sure that just like you had the ability with speech to have the speech language, the speaker change on the fly, or just set up a different profile for your speech so that when you reached, if you were a German speaker and reached an English page, you could switch to an English profile and have that voice take over and start reading. It would be nice to be able to switch the Braille tables for both input and output based on language. And that's what this feature is all about. You can set these profiles up to be on demand. And there is a webinar that addresses all of this. And we encourage you to visit that. I've given the link in the slide, but it's on the Freedom Scientific website in training under webinars. And if you search for Braille there, you'll find the new JAWS Braille feature for multilingual users. You'll find a webinar on it. It was done by our software fellow, Glenn Gordon. Many of you may know, who is the main architect for the JAWS product from many years back, and Adi Kushner, who was heavily involved in developing this technique for us, because it works very well for Braille users who are using multilingual. So he was one of the driving forces to get us to do it. So check on that. There's a slide here on setting up voice profiles. If you go into the settings center and search for profiles, you'll find underneath Braille General and Translation, you'll find language profiles and a way to set those up. FS support tool, something that we added back in 2021. And if you're talking with a distributor or a tech support person and you're having a problem, it may be very useful for them to be able to look at any log files that have been generated, or even what user settings you've got set. And rather than ask you to go through a lot of hoops to find that, if you run the FS support tool, it gathers these things up from your PC without taking your name and all of that information. It just takes what settings are in place, and it collects any log files that JAWS Fusion or ZoomText may have generated that would be useful in us trying to debug or help you solve this problem. It packages that all together, and it gives you an opportunity to have that uploaded directly to our support staff here, and you can provide your email address. And if you do that, and then make sure that the support team member that you're working with know that the support tool has been run, and generally they'll ask you when to do this. But when that happens, it's much easier for us to get access to it. Support for native math equations in Microsoft Word. There's a slide here on this. We've had a math viewer. We now have a math editor, so that you can go in and literally write on your Braille display using Nemeth, and you can create Braille output directly from your Braille keyboard now. There is a webinar on this that covers it in great detail. I would encourage you, if you're a math person, to go and view that, freedomscientific.com. Under training, under teachers, there is a webinar about accessing math content with JAWS and Fusion. And the link to this is on the slide that I'll include in the deck also. OCR directly to Microsoft Word. We've had for years the ability to do convenient OCR and get it into our results viewer where you can just read through it. If you wanted to put it in Word, you'd have to select it all, copy it, open Word, paste it in, save the document. We now give you an opportunity if you've got some content that you want to get access to, you want it OCR, and you want to put it into Word, you can move directly to that file in File Explorer. You can do insert spacebar to go into the layered command, O for OCR, and R to perform OCR on it. At that point, Word will open up if it's installed, and the results will appear directly in Word. You can also use the application menu while you're on these files, open it up, and you'll find convenient OCR to Word with JAWS in the applications menu, and you can choose it right there. Voice Assistant is something that we put into the product a couple of years ago. We've continued to improve upon. This allows you to use speech, your input, in order to perform some of the functions that you may not remember the keystrokes for. And in the 2022 release, we switched things over so that you have to use the word hey in front of either Sharky or Zoomy to wake them up. And you can also use a keystroke to do it. JAWS key and the Alt key and spacebar will wake up the voice assistant. And then you can give commands. And we initially had done things like talk slower, what time is it, tell me a joke. There's all kinds of things that you could do. And in 2022, we added some new things that would maybe offer some more productivity. Things like moving the virtual cursor to a location, waking up. Let's say you're on a web page and you want to select a portion of the web page. Get to the beginning of where you want to start the selection, wake up the voice assistant and say start selection. Now you can navigate through your web page to the end of the text that you want to select, wake up the voice assistant and say finish selection. And it will automatically highlight all of that information. Then you can copy it to the clipboard and move on and take it. So you don't have to remember the more difficult keystrokes to mark and then later select all of that information. You can also do some interesting things like copy version info to clipboard. This can be helpful if you're talking with a tech support person and they need to get version information off of your computer of different applications. You can just use that command and it will grab it all. There are many things in there, and if you haven't experimented with the voice assistant, I encourage you to give that a try. Many of these commands, of course, have been localized for your current language, and you'll have to experiment and look in the help system to get those commands. Some features that have been in for a while that I like to remind people about: the Braille and text viewer for JAWS and Fusion. You can turn these on. If it's a sighted person looking at your screen, they may find it to be very useful. If you're trying to show someone something about where you're reading and what the output looks like in Braille compared to the text, you can use insert spacebar B for Braille and text viewer. And then you hit B if you just want Braille, or T if you want the text viewer as well. We added a new keystroke to quickly restart JAWS. This is one that trainers had asked us for, that when they were working with someone remotely and they think that that person has done something and gotten JAWS in a bad state, and they just want them to restart their screen reader, if they do insert and spacebar to go to the layered command and then press F4, it will quickly shut down JAWS and restart JAWS. Doesn't create any crash files or dump files. It just quickly shuts it down and restarts it. You can try this at any time on your own and see how fast it works. We've also got a new command, or we've had a command for a while, and I've added a new one to suspend navigational quick keys. And this is very useful today because oftentimes you go to web pages that may be either an application or it's a web page that has keystrokes to allow you to navigate to different sections of the web page, not using JAWS, but just keystrokes are built into the site. Facebook is an example of this that allows you to move around on their page to different sections using specific commands that they've exposed. And if you're going to do that, you need to suspend your navigational quick keys first, but you don't want to turn off virtual cursor because you still want to be able to read with up and down arrow using virtual cursor. So in those cases, if you do insert plus shift plus Z. So there was a command to suspend virtual cursor before, insert Z. If you add the shift to it, it will suspend just the navigational quick keys, but leave virtual cursor on. Very useful. And finally, I want to talk about a coming soon feature. This will be out in the June update called the Notification Manager. I think ultimately this is going to be one of the most significant features that all users will want to take advantage of. The idea is applications and Windows itself is sending notifications many times to us. And some examples. If you go into Microsoft Edge, the browser, and you look up a URL, you will hear from JAWS, you'll hear loading page, and then you will hear once the page has finished loading, loading complete. These are Windows notifications coming from the browser itself, and those are things that you may or may not want to hear. You may want to hear them differently. You may want them to be sound effects rather than speech. And the Notification Manager allows you to modify that. You'll get to the Notification Manager once the June update comes out using the JAWS key, spacebar, and the letter N, which currently just reads back the last notification that Windows sent to JAWS. But in the June release, it'll pop up a dialog box that exposes all the notifications that have been sent during the last 24 hours, provided JAWS or Fusion were actually running. If JAWS isn't running and a notification comes in, that notification will not show in the history when you run JAWS later. In the notification, when you do this, you land in the list, the history of each message that has come across, exactly what the text of the message was, the application that sent it, and the time it was sent. And based on that notification, you may decide you want to create a rule for it. And there is a create a rule button. And when you go in to create that rule, you can change what the message is going to be. So you'll see the message that it was. You can say shorten the message and you can type a different message. Or you can even choose play a sound for that message. And you can change what is going to be flashed in Braille when that message comes across. So you may want to allow the text to come across or not, but you still want to see a flash message of the information, and you have the ability to do that. Or you may say, I don't want that one in Braille, don't interrupt my display. I only want it in text, or I only want it spoken, or I only want the sound. So you can change it and make it any way you want. Now, this will be in the June update. Coming in the 2023 update, we're going to continue to enhance this feature by including regular expressions to allow you to more easily modify groups of messages that would come across with simple rules. And so you'll see more about that in the initial release of 2023. We're also hoping to put a filter in to filter the history list by default. So some of these things that are going to be spoken, which like loading page, you don't necessarily need to see the loading page show up in your history list in the future. And we might want to filter that one out all the time, so that you would never see it and not have to create a rule yourself. So there are some things that will filter out of the list in the 2023 version. And before I open it up for questions, also in the slide deck, the last slide is resource links to give you access to training pages, information about remote access, offline installers, and FS Activate page if you're doing activation manually or doing network licenses. This is a link to help and assist you in doing those things. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. There's a lot of people. If you would raise hands if you've got something, and I'll unmute you and we'll bring you into the table. And I'm going to unmute Jan and Roxana, both from our company. If you guys can unmute now, I hope. There you go. Hi, Jan.
Hello, Eric.
You know, I just thought that I probably should have stopped at some point, made sure everybody could hear me okay.
No, but you were quite clear, no problem. Thanks very much.
I apologize for my German. It's not very good, so I spoke English. So, Oliver, you had your hand up. I'll ask you to unmute if you can. Olivia, are you there? Alt A should unmute you, Olivier. There you are.
Yeah. So hi, I've got 2 or 3 questions. The first about the thread thing that you described for Outlook.
Yes.
Suppose you and I exchanged emails and we answered, and there were some messages that were exchanged back and forth. Could the end command be used just to go deep in that thread, even if there is only 2 people? Because I may want to find something that was said
Yes.
before. And
so let me read this back, what I think I heard you say. So if you and I wrote back and forth, we kept replying to each other.
Yeah.
Now we've got a message and you're in it 10 times and I'm in it 10 times.
Yeah.
Yes. So as you press the letter N, it doesn't care who spoke next. It just cares that somebody else is in there, and it's going to continue to move to each one. So you can use N to step through, and it will stop at every occurrence of whoever the last person that replied was.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll check that for French then.
May I add, Olivier and Eric, there's also when you use a focus Braille display, you can make use of the nav rocker keys, you know?
Yep.
That's
Great.
right.
Thanks.
Jan, you may have moved away from your microphone a little bit. You were
sorry. Yep.
kind of quiet.
I'm back now.
Almost.
Okay.
The second is about skim read. I had some question on that sometimes, and it's a function that was around for literally forever, for quite some time.
Yes.
The difficulty sometimes is that you cannot easily identify that the color you want to track is that color in particular, because there is a whole bunch of different flavors for a given color. So do you think we could imagine a system where you could ask the JAWS basically to tell you, look, in that document that you've opened, you've got several portions of texts that are written in red, whatever red flavor. Do you want to use that as the skim read rule? Sorry.
Stoort mij niet.
Yeah,
I think it would be something interesting for quite a lot of people, I imagine.
now have you tried this and discovered that it's not working? Because that's
When you manage to identify yourself the good color that is in the document,
it works.
it's working because
Yeah.
that's the purpose of it.
Yes. So I think what has happened is over time, as technology has been changing and we're not necessarily able to capture the color information. And I know that that's changed in Microsoft Word. I think we struggle now and we're not able to get the color from the document. And I think this has become more of a problem. In general, for those of you listening, what is being talked about here is that if you had a document or an email thread, and let's say certain portions of it were a particular color, and you wanted to jump through and have everything red that was in that color, you would set up a rule using skim reading to say, locate and read me the first sentence of each paragraph if the text is this particular color with this particular background. And that can be very useful.
Yep.
And I think if you're discovering that we have no way of capturing what that color is, this would be a good bug to submit. And I'd like you to, if you drop me a note afterwards on this, I'm going to go in and make sure that we've got a record on it, because skim reading it's a powerful tool. And I know over the years, it hasn't gotten much attention. And I think technology has changed such that some of this is broken down. And
Okay, I'll double check that and I will make you a note.
okay.
My last one was about smart navigation. I'm using it quite a lot, and I find that on some web pages, you can find that some punctuation signs are put on a separate line, for example, because apparently there is some text that is hidden, some HTML things inside the code of the page that produces the fact that some punctuation and some part of the line are not on the same line in the virtual buffer. So the idea of smart navigation was that you had an experience that was more close than what you had before, and something that is closer, some sighted people can see on the screen.
Yeah, you'll have to send me an example of this one. There's got to be, is this a page being developed, or is this just regular content that you're running across?
I would say it's not necessarily developed, and I will try to send you something. Yeah.
Yeah, send me a sample on that. And so you're using smart navigation. What in particular caused you to start using it? There are some people like it and some people have never tried it or didn't like it. What is it that brings smart navigation?
The idea that you can have several items on the same line, and for example, if you've got some buttons on a toolbar, you'll see the toolbar as a whole, and you would navigate using your arrow keys, and you would not arrow down lots of times.
Right.
That's an example.
And tables?
Tables are much easier to navigate if they are correctly built. You can navigate your columns, your lines. If there are headings, you hear the headings. It's a perfect way of navigate them for me.
Yes, I agree. I'm glad to hear you're using it. it came about, smart navigation started really because we needed it for Magic back in the day. Magic was our screen magnification software that was adopting JAWS as its speech engine and navigational aid. And for a magnification user, and in this case, you're a Braille user, I think the same thing, you want to see the page as it's actually laid out and not in a single column virtual document, which is the way speech screen reader users often want to navigate something. And another example might be if you were reading a web page and on that web page they embedded links inside of the text of the lines. The way a JAWS user experiences this with the virtual cursor without SmartNav is for each down arrow, it will read the block of text up to the next link if there's a link in the line. And then you have to hit down arrow to read that link, and then down arrow to read the rest of the text on the line. So it took 3 keystrokes to read what may have been read on one line.
Think of Wikipedia page, for example.
Yes, exactly. Wikipedia would be so many lines on the virtual buffer, and it's greatly reduced because this is a place where they embed those links in the text. So if you haven't tried that, I encourage you to give it a shot. You can go to the configuration manager, search for the word smart, and you'll find smart navigation. And there's an option in there to allow you to set it up for controls or controls and tables. And it'll be a different experience. And I think you may find it very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Olivier. Okay, we have about 5 minutes. I was going to end here by the top of the hour. If anybody else has a question, you can put your hand up and we'll see if we can get you in. I did mention that we will be releasing the June update. It'll be around the 21st of June, so we're about 4 weeks out. And around September 1st, or the first week in September, you should be seeing the first public beta of 2023. We're wrapping the development up, or we're actually firing the development up, and we'll be wrapping up most of the feature changes and fixes around those features will be done in August. And I think we've got some nice things coming, especially improvements in the notification manager, and we've got a great new tool coming for the magnification product as well, and we may speak some more about that tomorrow in our fusion session, and Roxana may mention something about that in her Zoom text session on Friday without showing too much, but I think we can start to explain it. I think this is going to be a great magnification feature. So with that, I'll wrap up. I don't know exactly how the slide decks will get distributed, but I will make sure that the SightCity folks have access to these, to this deck and to tomorrow's deck, of course, and hopefully they will get them published. If you don't find a way of locating them, if you send an email to me, Damery, D-A-M-E-R-Y, or your distributor or dealer that you work with over there could certainly help you find me. But if you send an email to me and just put SightCity slides, I will send you the slide deck directly in an email message. And with that, I will bid you a great rest of the SightCity conference. I hope you attend the sessions. I'm sure there'll be many good ones. And for those of you who join on Fusion tomorrow, I'll see you then.